subscribe to me.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and hello everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the webinar series Economic Action Council and Malaysia Advanced Technology Nurturing Networks, or better known as EAC and Magnet, Partnership for Action. Today, in our first episode in Season 1, 2021, the topic of discussion is Invigorating the Technology-Based Industry Ecosystem for Malaysia's Competitiveness. Thank you to all who are watching us live on My Malaysia YouTube. You may send in your questions at the chat box anytime throughout the session. We will collect the questions and address them during the Q&A session later. To commence our discussion today, with great pleasure, we invite Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Mustafa Mohamad, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, Economy, to give his opening remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Professor Tan Sri Azlan, distinguished guests, invited speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the organizers, the Economic Action Council Secretariat and the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Tech, or MITE, for organizing the EAC Magnet webinar series. I was made to understand that this is the first in the series of webinars, a kick-off to a strategic platform to discuss issues pertaining to technologies. The fourth industrial revolution involves a fusion of technologies founded in the previous digital revolution. The advancement of software enhances the connectivity between humans and machines and promotes productivity and efficiency. IR 4.0 alters the way we live, how businesses are conducted, changes in our working environment and how we communicate with each other. These changes further dictate the transformation of entire systems of governance, management and production. All of us need to make the necessary adjustments for this inevitable shift to ensure our relevance in this new landscape. The webinar today is for us to critically and comprehensively deliberate on the future. How can technology be used to improve and create a safer and a cleaner working environment? How do we increase production efficiency? What are the areas that need to be focused on to produce technology-savvy, skilled workers? New paradigms brought by these technologies will be the future norm. Understanding and collaboration among experts representing various disciplines, therefore, had never been so important. Good teamwork is crucial in seizing the opportunities as well as recognizing the challenges brought by this industrial revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, under the 12th Malaysia Plan, the government has identified technology and digitalization adoption as key priorities to transform Malaysia into a prosperous, inclusive and sustainable nation. The adoption of digitalization and advanced technologies will facilitate economic recovery and strengthen the foundation for a better future. I'm sure the speakers today will give us valuable insights on how we can invigorate the technology-based industry ecosystem to enhance Malaysia's competitiveness. This discourse will help policymakers, the business community, and other stakeholders in charting a people-centric, inclusive, and environmentally friendly development. Let me once again congratulate the organizers and express my appreciation to our distinguished speakers for sharing the knowledge and expertise on the various topics. Thank you to all attendees for your participation. I wish you a fruitful session. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Mustafa Mohamad. Before we begin our session, let me introduce our moderator for today. Dr. Muhammad Abdul Khalid is currently a research fellow at Institute of Malaysian and International Studies, IKMAS, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research, an adjunct professor at the Centre for Policy Research and International Studies, CENPRIS, University Science Malaysia. He is formerly the economic advisor to the former Prime Minister, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, and member of the Economic Action Council. He had served as the Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute, Head of Economics at the Securities Commission Malaysia, and a Senior Analyst at the Institute of Strategic and International Studies Malaysia. He was also a Senior Technical Advisor at the United Nations Development Programme Malaysia. Mohammed obtained his PhD from the Paris Institute of Political Studies, commonly referred to as CIASPO, has also served as a consultant to the World Bank, United Nations Development Programme, United Nations Children's Fund, United Nations Population Fund, United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and United Nations Population Fund. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Muhammad Khalid to moderate the session. And the floor is yours, Dr. Muhammad.
Thank you, Ms. Zeti. Good afternoon, everyone. We have listened to the speech by the Honourable Minister earlier. I think one of the key points that he mentioned, that he reminded us, is that on the point that the outcome of deploying technologies in enhancing competitiveness is towards people-centric and environmental-friendly economic development. What we do is towards those two objectives, and that should be the outcome that we should look forward to, which the Prime Minister, Minister have rightly said. And in this instance, Malaysia has done relatively well. When you look at our competitiveness, World Competitiveness Outlook for report, rather, we rank about number 25, much better than compared to some OECD countries, some rich countries. Even on World Economic Forum, we have done relatively well. However, it was cautioned that if we do not improve on our capabilities in terms of human capital, R&D spending, and productivity, and if we don't improve on our connectiveness in terms of supply chain, trade and logistics, and as well as on infra, we will lose our competitiveness. For instance, compared to countries around the region, our spending on R&D is relatively slightly higher compared to ASEAN countries. But when we compare to developed countries, very competitive countries, we are much lower. We spend about 1.3% of GDP currently on R&D, but when we compare to South Korea, for instance, they spend almost 3 times than us. Even if you look at just one company, you look at Samsung. Samsung itself spent 4 times more than the entire Malaysian spending on R&D. So we have a lot to catch up. And one of the reasons that been put for relatively lower technology adoption is the excess of cheap labor in Malaysia that make it not competitive to use technologies. So how do we go from here? How do we ensure that we can bolster, like the topic says, our technology-based industry ecosystem to enhance, to ensure Malaysia become fully competitive for the outcome that we want, that it benefit the people and benefit the society as a whole. So to discuss this, we have excellent 5 panelists to share their views with us. I will introduce one by one. We start with the host, Dr. Yusuf Sulaiman, President and CEO of MITE, and on my left is Professor Tan Sri Dr. Noazlan Ghazali, Director of National Economic Action Council. We also have 3 online speakers, 2 in Malaysia and 1 from Geneva. In Malaysia, we have Mr. Jafri Ibrahim, CEO of Collaborative Research Engineering Science and Technology Center. We have Datuk Madani Syari, CEO of MARI, Malaysian Automotive Robotics and IoT Institute. And from Geneva, we have Atilio Batista, Project Lead Country Accelerator of World Economic Forum. How I plan to do this is I'm going to do it 2 rounds. The first round is 7.7 minutes each for each panelist to share their views on the topic, and I will then pass to Professor Tan Sri Noazlan to give his views and comments on the remarks made by the panelists. Once they're done, the second round I'll pose each panelist a question each. Before then, I'll pass to Prof. Noor Azlan to wrap up. That's how I plan to do this, and we hope to wrap up within 90 minutes. Perhaps I can start with our host, Dr. Yusof, to share your views. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, our esteemed moderator, Tan Sri Noor Azlan, Chief of the Economic Action Council. Let me start by saying Assalamualaikum and greetings. Good afternoon here, but good morning to Attilio in Europe. And I'm very grateful that we are able to have this session this afternoon. I think Mike and Tan Sri, we had started this conversation about a year ago, and we continue to have this conversation, especially after the launching of the 12th Malaysia Plan. And I think this conversation is very, very important, and we have found mutual benefits in terms of how this conversation has turned out. I'm happy to see Attilio, our collaborator from the World Economic Forum. We had conversations with Attilio, I think about a year and a half ago, talking about how Malaysia and WEF can actually collaborate. I think we are looking into some form of a 4IR platform that the WEF experienced in helping other countries. Maybe there's some format or some structure that we can actually share. And of course, Jeffrey and Datuk Madani is a part of our magnet, the Umbrella Association. When we first come up with this idea, everybody, even not a second, took in hesitation, said, let's do it, let's have these conversations between agencies of different ministries and different disciplines, so that we can actually exchange some ideas. Can I show some slide, please? Thank you. Just to help me with this conversation. So it's all about connecting the dots, actually. Unless you have a very good ecosystem and platforms that work together, I think the inspiration and aspiration of what the minister spoke just now will have a lot of difficulty in getting it done. Next slide, please. So I think the need for this ecosystem is more profound after the pandemic. I mean, a lot of companies have no longer operating. That affects the supply chain. You mentioned just now about connectedness, and I think this is a very important thing to consider when we look at mobilizing the 12th Malaysia Plan. We need to have a proper ecosystem and proper platform that can deliver the implementation. So I think 3 points I just want to make is that in this ecosystem, partnership is non-negotiable. Partnership is very critical. And I think in many sense, Magnet is actually trying to embrace that inter-ministerial, multidisciplinary approach by working together, not only in terms of our thinking, but also in terms of the implementing. And as I mentioned about World Economic Forum, I think global linkages and network is very, very important for us to see where we are. You said that we are doing quite well in terms of competitiveness, but we need to continue to actually engage with the global community to know where we are, not only in terms of competitiveness, but where we are in certain industries and in certain technologies. And I think solid and well thought of national plans is very critical, Doctor. We've seen the national COVID-19 immunization program, which we can actually monitor daily, that program, in terms of its timeline, in terms of resources, in terms of its communication, and we have a sense of where that program is going to be and how successfully we're going to be towards the end of the year. Not many programs go through this kind of scrutiny, this kind of evaluation, preparation, and etc. I'd like to see more national plans, especially if you talk about technology, having an impact. We need to have this kind of a preparation for our program. So we don't have too much in this. Next slide, please. So basically, I think what we do in MITE is basically framing the future, see what are the coming opportunities and also threats. But I think it is very important for us to think about having a frame that would actually allow us to replicate our success or even correct our mistakes by design, not by chance. We sometimes have one or two success, but then the question is, how can we replicate this? Because we didn't design it necessarily, and it happened just like that. But hopefully we can do that. And in MITE, one of the things we do in terms of this design is to be focused. We can't do everything. I mean, MITE and Malaysia is on the same boat. We don't have too many resources. Our financing are very limited, so we need to focus. In our case, we think that these are the 4 things that are very important for the country to move forward and become competitive. We talk about mobility, you talk about supply chain, logistics and transportation. That is where the thing is to keep the cost down. 4R, where technologies are really helping industry to be more efficient, but also to create more opportunities. We talk about sustainable development, a balanced growth for the country. We look into smart cities, we look into energy efficient buildings, we look at a lot of things that are very much in line with the world view of how the business should be conducted in the future. And of course, foresight is a program and also is a tool that might use in most of our planning. And there on the right side is also when we approach any of these development, whether it's technology or industry development, it has to be holistic. And we think it's not only technology is important, but this approach that we use called FIRST, or first, you need the funding, enough funding, you need the infrastructure, soft and hard, you need regulatory, good policy that can support many of these and drive the programs, and then you need skills and talents, of course. And with the technology, it needs to be governed properly so that all these resources are done in a very efficient, optimal way. My last slide is basically trying to force these few, I think, important points. One is that we need to have this conversation, or else we do not know what others are doing, we do not appreciate what are others' best practices, we don't appreciate what success other people are doing. That's why the conversation between Magnet is very important, because we start to appreciate each other's work. Next is collaboration. You can't do without collaboration. Look at the vaccine development, look at other development in the world. You have to somehow collaborate. That will fast track your initiatives, that will make success much more easier to achieve. And finally, you know, Malaysia is well known for, people say this, Malaysia is good at planning, but not good in implementation. I think it's not entirely correct. We are good in planning, we are good in implementation. We have Cyberjaya as an implementation of the Multimedia Super Corridor program, but we are very bad follow-through. We don't follow through. I mean, those people who take over the baton has to actually put more effort in terms of making the earlier or the original idea to be realized, not to divert or you know. So that's the follow-through is very key, and you know, in technology especially, long gestation period, you need that stamina, you need people to understand and follow through everything. So I guess if you put all these things into a structure, into our, you know, as part of our principles and discipline, I'm sure we can reach that competitiveness thing that you talked about, Doctor, earlier. So that's from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato'. The key points I'll take from you, I'm sure Prof. Azlan will also summarize the letter and give comments, is on connecting the dots with partnership is a vital ingredient. Allow me to invite Mr. Jeffrey to share his views on the topic. You have 7 minutes, sir. You are muted, I think. Better.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So let me just pull up my slide. So thank you. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. Am I transmitting the slide?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel, and good afternoon to everyone. So let me just introduce to you CREST. So CREST stands for Collaborative Research in Engineering, Science and Technology. So we're a not-for-profit organization, and as the name suggests, we're a collaborative platform from the get-go since our inception in 2011. Just to give you a bit of a background, CREST, how we were formed, Malaysia has had a very rich um, history of with the electronics industry dating back to the 70s. So with well-known companies such as Intel, AMD, Osram, Motorola, and so many more set up their manufacturing sites in Penang in the 70s, and they have grown from strength to strength since then, expanding into design and development and much more. And some of them even go ahead and develop their own R&D centers in Penang. However, there's not much collaboration between the industry and academia. Even if there was, it was more in terms of personal relationships. It's not very structured from the get-go. So the industries got together after dialogues with the EPU minister back in 2009 and decided to basically present a paper to the Economic Council to form a catalyst organization called CREST. So CREST is a triple helix model organization. So we try to bring the best out of the three sides: the academia, the government, and industry. So although these are the three members of the collaboration, it is still industry-led. So we have a slightly different model in which the industry will try to lead the way in terms of what their needs are and try to enrich the economy along the way. All right. So if I can get the next slide. Next slide, please. So at CREST, we do three things. We do collaborative research, we do industry relevant talent, and we do commercialization facilitation. So we have a lot of dialogues from the beginning with the industry, to which we wanted them to basically tell us what are the different areas that would basically benefit you know, the industry as a whole. And when we started, they basically identified the LED optoelectronics as one particular cluster, the IoT and embedded systems as another one, IC design, test and validation, advanced materials and packaging, Industry 4.0, and drones and autonomous vehicles. These were the topics that were identified by the industry. We elaborated, we go down in a little bit more detail so that we can engage with academia and also government to basically drive the collaborative R&D in these particular areas. And every 2 years, we will revisit all these areas and refine them in which areas are important and so on in detail. In 2015, we also embarked on deep tech areas. So this is something that is also at the end of a dialogue with the industry. They wanted us to go deep into the LEDs area, to which the epitaxy technology needs to be better defined, and we basically raise new funds with the government, also with participation from industry and academia, to basically drive the gallium nitride program for 5-year journey. Also, we've also expanded it into the digital-based solutions, which is digital healthcare and industry 4.0, to which electronics and software are major components that we think we can bring value to. Okay. Then the next slide. Basically, I just want to share some basically the some of the accomplishments that we have. The next slide, please. So since we started, we've basically approved 162 projects. We've got a collaboration between more than 100 companies and 25 universities. When we started, the arrangement was 50-50% funding between government and industry. But as of today, we see the industry basically contributing more than the industry. And out of the activities that we've done, we've managed to create a talent pool of more than 9,000 of deep tech talent network of industry, domain experts, and academic researchers, and so on. We've also got specific programs. I think we started on the GAN on GAN program, to which we are collaborating with a Nobel Prize winner, to which we are creating our own IPs, and we have our own recipe for commercial grade LED. And we've got 2 world-class labs that is equivalent to the Nobel Prize winner's lab in Santa Barbara. While gallium nitride is very key to the LED sector, it's also a key material to many other opportunities, billion-dollar opportunities. So with this initiative, we also managed to convince a major multinational to set up base. They're based in Kulim, Kedah, to which a 5 billion ringgit investment was brought in as a result of this initiative with gallium nitride. When we started, we promised that for every ringgit spent, we would try to generate at least 7 times multiplier, to which our R&D projects and the LED programs have managed to generate an 11 times multiplier. And also the commercialization rate that we have is at 27% for the completed R&Ds that we have. Okay. Just very quickly, just to, because the question was, how is CREST helping the strategic, what's your strategic role for the country? So with this one initiative, I just wanted to show that we've basically managed to attract the new investment into the country. Also, we've managed to build world-class labs that not only build our own IP for LED, but we are also developing a complete LED ecosystem from the front-end research all the way to products and services. We managed to create high-impact jobs. More than 1,500 jobs were created because of the GAN program. We've got 70 gallium nitride researchers, to which essentially these are well sought after globally. One of our researchers recently was hired by Facebook in the UK, for example, and they're basically sought after. So since we started in the 70s, LED is a very key export component for the country. But since the gallium nitride program, it has doubled in value, from 0.4 billion to 0.8 billion USD in 2017. So that's what I wanted to share as an introduction to what CREST does. Thank you.
Allow me now to invite Datuk Madani to share his views before we pass to Attilio. Datuk Madani, all yours.
Hello, Assalamualaikum. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes,
So,
we can hear you clearly.
Yeah, again, so thank you very much for this opportunity. Sorry not to be at mic physically. Okay, so I'm the CEO of the Malaysia Automotive Robotics and IoT Institute. previously. Yeah, somebody was saying something?
No, all yours.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, so I'm the CEO of the Malaysia Automotive Robotics and IoT Institute, MARI. Previously, we were known as the Malaysia Automotive Institute. We were rebranded to become MARI in the year 2019. So, MARI, MARI itself is an agency under MITI. Previously, we started with being the think tank and focal point and enabler of technology and coordination center for the automotive industry. And then from there, we move on to the overall mobility ecosystem. And then from there, when the rebranding happened from MAI to MARI, and then we include the aspects of IoT and robotics. I'd like to make a clarification here. As we all know and understand that the automotive sector, the automotive industry is one of the highest, if not the highest industry that uses or deploy automation robotics. Globally, it is recorded at above 33% of automation happening in the auto industry. So when we were MAI from the year 2010 onwards, we were very much involved in automating and mechanizing, the supplier, the supply chain, the automotive sectors, the vendors, as well as the OEMs. And many of those solutions and tools that we brought in the auto industry, now that we become MARI, we are redeploying all of this application to other sectors, especially to other sectors such as now E&E, gloves, rubber, etc., and so on. But also we add on all these elements of IoT sensors to allow a real-time feedback loop to the management or to the process owner. Okay? Now, I'd like to go straight to this slide, the strategic deployment. So this is what we have been promoting in MARI. So MARI, I think, probably is one of the few government agencies that has completed our three-tier, I would call it three-tier services. One is the infrastructure as a service, IaaS. So we possess our own data center here in Saravajaya. We are at tier 4 level, security level of data center. And because of this, we actually provide cloud as a service. Yeah. So for example, the current system seems CIMS, the system that is being used by MITI, by our ministry, to approve operations of factories, companies during the MCO. So that system was developed by MARI and still being hosted by MARI until today. So that is being hosted and hosted by us and using our cloud services. On top of our IaaS, MARI also, we possess our own platform as a service. So in doing so, we have developed internally our big data analytics. Yeah? So we got a big data analytics platform, a full 5-stack data analytics. And at the same time, we also provide services in the high-performance supercomputing. So many, the big OEMs in the automotive industry, many universities are actually using our supercomputer when it comes to high level of calculation. So we provide those services to the industry as well as to the academia. Now, the third service is the software as a service. Now, this is where we work with many startup companies and with many entrepreneurs, whereby we provide the platform for them to come and then share with us the solutions that they have developed, and then we could integrate that solutions into the bigger horizon of PaaS and IaaS. Yeah. So to date, we have developed more than 50 solutions, software as a service, and all of these solutions are being hosted at the MARI Cloud Services. Are all being the data are all being stored in our data center, and the deployment is being being controlled or being coordinated. So from there, from all these three services, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, we jump into the verticals of specifics. Yeah. So, for example, we have got telematics. For example, telematics is one of the vertical that we have developed together with Peradua and some other vendor. We developed our own onboard diagnostic tool. That is a vertical that is based on this horizontal, on the horizontal, based on the SAS, PAS, and IAS. We have got also the manufacturing execution system, which is a system that we deploy across SMEs and across vendors, whereby we deploy depending on their availability and their requirement. So we have enterprise cost planning, an ERP that can be suited for a mere inventory function, or it could be suited for a production planning function, or it could be used for from the overall purchasing up to delivery functions of the company. And with Mari now, so we started to branch out into other sectors. So we are also now moving into smart farming, into trade analytics, into health monitoring, etc., and so on. Now, all of this are being made possible because of that strategic deployment, the fact that we have got our own base under, as I mentioned earlier, the infrastructure, our own data center, our own cloud, our own big data analytics, and our own high-performance supercomputing. Lastly, I've mentioned about the Mari Cloud Web Services, the MACWES. So this is the cloud services that we are currently deploying across Malaysia. So many of the stakeholders that are partners to Mari, or even those who wants to subscribe to this apart from the other AWS or Alibaba and so on. So they subscribe to our MACWES, to our cloud web services, and this is something that is already live, ongoing at the moment. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, so this is a brief introduction about Mari. Yeah, it is automotive, it is about technology automation, you know, but I think as a strategic deployment, I like to highlight the fact that, you know, we are able to deploy many of the services, be it management system, be it system integration. We are able to deploy all of that because of the platforms that the back end that we possess, such as in the data center, the cloud services, the supercomputing, as well as the big data analytics. So that's it from me for the first start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dato' Madani. Now let me invite Atilio. You have 7 minutes to share your views. Please.
Hello, everyone. Really pleasure to be here. Can you hear me well?
Yes, better.
Perfect. I'll share also my screen quickly, and I prepared a few slides for today. Just 1 second. Perfect. Thank you. So it's been really interesting to hear my other colleagues and panelists until now. I think I'll try to take a bit of a step back almost and think about what are then the economic and social implications, or what are the economic and social strategies maybe that we need to work on to really try to create some of these new markets. As was been mentioned before, I work with the Center for the New Economic Society of the World Economic Forum, and we really try to look at the socioeconomic implications of how we should think about growth and development in the future. We really focus on 4 main areas: economic growth, development, transformation, but also work, wage, and job creation, diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, education, skills, and learning. So really, our work encompasses all of the cross-sector and cross-industry, if you want, issues around competitiveness, innovation, but also future of work, future of jobs, skills, talent, gender, inclusion, etc. So maybe I think when we try to approach some of these questions, we really do it from a point of view of economic transformation. So how we can transform our economies and make them work better, not just in terms of more growth, but really also in terms of better growth. So how we create some of these new areas of the economy that will be beneficial not just for for prosperity, but also for environment, inclusion, etc., etc. So this is really where we started when we started to think about markets of tomorrow and what are the areas, what are the niches that we should be focusing on in the future to try to really transform our economies. So we've published in 2020, so actually just a year ago, was the end of October 2020, a bit of a paper where we outline a little bit our thinking around these issues. And we are building a little bit on the literature that these days has been asking somehow to take a bit of a more proactive approach to economic transformation. So the idea, I guess, is that at the core, some of these new markets won't be created by itself, by the market, but there will need to be a bit of a collaborative approach to it. How can we, both government and the private sector, work together to shape some of these new niches? And as much as possible, we've tried to adopt a little bit also of what has been called a bit of a multi-level approach to these new markets. So not just technology, but also the social institutional innovation that goes with it. So it's really not only about creating some new fancy product, but also what are the systemic conditions that need to be created around those products for a market to flourish and to be created from scratch. So we have defined markets of tomorrow as the niches of both technological and social institutional innovation that are going to really transform our economy in the future because they're not yet mature now, so they're not really fully functioning, they're not really established yet, there is not a mature market for some of these products or services. But if these markets are created, they will have a significant potential impact on our economy, prosperity, and also better sustainability and inclusion. I think there's a bit of a delay in the slides. I think I'm on a different slide right now, but hopefully that will catch up afterwards. Apologies for that. I think the slides being shown. Well, now I was speaking to this one. So we have clustered these new markets into three main categories, trying to understand what other objectives, what other societal objectives they will feed into in addition to growth and prosperity. So we thought, of course, one big bucket was around planet and safeguarding planetary boundaries. A second one was around empowering and protecting people, and the third one about advancing knowledge. So just in general, what are the type of new markets that will help us in increasing our understanding of the world around us? And I think back to the point of not just being around technology, but also around social institutional innovation, you'll see that some of these 20 markets that we have collected don't really have necessarily a strong technological component, but they might be more about creating the conditions around it, either legal conditions or societal conditions, or just market infrastructure, if you want, that will make some of these markets work. So, for example, we do have in here things that are like, for example, electric vehicles, but also new antibiotics or space flights that clearly have a strong technological component to being able to produce and sell some of these services or products. But there are other ones that are mainly based on institutional innovations that need to be created at a country level. So, for example, when it comes to greenhouse gas allowances, those are new markets that many countries have set up in their country, basically to actually trade carbon. Plastic recycling, also something that has been going on for decades, but still has a lot of issues when it comes to what can be recycled, what cannot be recycled, how do we create the services around it. So really trying to take a bit of a systemic perspective to some of these issues. And then we try to think about what are the conditions then that need to be in place for these markets to flourish. So as much as possible, countries should try to identify those markets and those conditions through foresight exercises. And I think this is where Mike also has a lot of expertise. But then also think about what are the things that need to be in place. And we have identified 7 of them. So each new market needs to have at the core a new invention that needs to be sustainably produced at scale. So there needs to be some new product or service. But then there needs to be enough production, so enough companies that are willing to take those new products to the market. So a little bit back to the commercialization aspect. But sometimes bringing supply is not enough. So demand might not pick up automatically from the very beginning. So what can be done to create a sufficient demand for some of these new markets that we want for a better society and for a better environment. And I think here, for example, the case of the vaccine development has been it's been pretty much exemplary. I mean, where actually governments have already provided demand for companies to actually bring those vaccines to the market. So there have been pre-agreements of purchasing by many countries and governments to actually ensure that there will be sufficient demand. And then, of course, infrastructure, not just physical, but also digital infrastructure in some cases for transactions to take place, but also complementary infrastructure when we think about electric vehicles, but also hydrogen. It's not just about producing it, but also storing it, taking it from one place to another. So all of this needs to be in place as well when we think about the planning that a country has to do. And then moving on into the more socio-institutional aspects, something around codification. So of course, legal frameworks might not be up to date always when it comes to some of these new products. So when we think about data markets or also artificial intelligence markets, not always our legal codes were actually fit for purpose for some of these new products and assets, and what are the implications of them. And finally, standards and values. So standards, it's really about whenever there is a new technological exploration, if you want, there might be a lot of divergence at first, and then at some point the market might need to converge around a technological standard that is more efficient and that actually applies better to all consumers and producers. And very often that process takes long and might actually prevent the market from aligning. I think here as well, when it comes to electric vehicles, right now we see a lot of different standards being present in the market. So full electric, hybrid plug-in, all of them having different needs and different type of implications when it comes to the infrastructure, etc. And finally, value. When we think about value, it's really about how society sees some of these new products and markets. Are they ready? Are people ready to adopt them? Are they concerned about some of the implications that they might have for themselves, for the environment, for their kids, etc.? So also that's an issue that very often governments will need to take into consideration when they think about transforming their economy and creating some of these new niches of growth. Maybe one final point on how this multi-level perspective should work. I think it's about, and there's a next slide that should show up in a moment. Apologies for that. I think as much as possible, it's about the actors that are trying to drive this change. So both the public and the private sector, they do have an agency in terms of trying to really make those changes and creating those conditions. But there is also what we've called a landscape. Also, there's a set of exogenous factors within each country that don't really change very easily. So I think whenever both a company or a government think about some of these issues, it will be important to think about the complexity of the entire system and what can be done in a medium to short term time versus what can be done in the longer term. So when it comes to maybe 5 or 10 years. And we've seen when it comes to the energy transition or some of these mass shift in the economy, that many of these factors are at play, and if you don't take all of them into account, you might not be able to really reap the benefits of your R&D, of your just technological innovation, because it might not be adopted at scale and therefore have the type of impact that you might be expecting. So that was it from my end. I think apologies for the slideshow. I think it's been slower than what I was showing. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Tilio. Prof. Azlan, I'll invite you to share your views. Are you convinced with all the previous 4 speakers that what they presented will make Malaysia more competitive?
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, and thanks also to Dr. Yusuf and Team Mike, and as well as Magnet. I'm the first time when I was informed about Magnet, I'm very impressed. I must say that along that at the central office of the government, we are looking at so many players, and we know that it's kind of everyone is striving for, to deliver what their function, established for, but are they connected? So in terms of connectivity, I think that's good. But I'm hearing something which I think in the right directions, but I'm also hearing something that sometimes raises concerns to me. On one side, the idea of you cannot do things alone. I think connecting the dots, I'm hearing triple helix, I'm hearing creating market for tomorrow, and collaborative industry-led. Those are, I mean, these are good in the sense that you need collaborations to really make sure that technology can be there in our economy. My concern is that the connection now seems to be among the promoters of technology. The challenge is actually not among the promoters. We are all subscribers. The problem is actually a lot more with non-subscribers. People who probably will not be able to see the importance of technology, people who probably resist toward technology, people who are thinking that bringing technology will be costly for them, and they still kind of hanging on in a very traditional manner. I think you mentioned about the fact that in Malaysia, we are surrounded by a theme which is, I think, we need to undo this, that is cheap economy. We love things when they are cheap. The praise to the government is when you make things cheap. You know, if you can bring things cheap, that means you are good. And that is where the problem starts. I must share with you a good example, I mean, a real situation now. While we are attending the COVID problems, we know that we are kind of, in a way, chasing out foreign workforce, the cheap laborers. Many actually losing their jobs, and many have returned back, and also there's an aggressive move trying to find them, but our interest is very much COVID. You know, no one talks about that we are actually, I mean, doing all this for the good of the nation in terms of moving forward in technology. No one talks about it. So over the last few weeks or few months, I would say that there's a serious cry of the industries coming back and say to the government that please bring them back. Please allow them, release them from all these, places where we kept them, in certain quarters. And everybody is saying that all sectors, even I'm hearing last, in a few meetings that I attended, that not only plantation, not only construction, the manufacturing comes in, and services, hoteliers comes in, restaurants comes in, everybody is asking for, we need that labor. I mean, it really, I mean, I feel like, I mean, where are we actually? So this is, I think, something that is so much deep in our economy that all the while, a significant portion of our moving forward is achieved through being cheap. And that is where the problem starts. And I think, it's good to have collaborations of the promoters, but I think we need also to find a way of trying to bridge to the other side of it that seems to be moving in different directions. I mean, I understand the immediate needs for recovery. People say that construction work, fruits, I mean, all these, plantations, no one is attending it. But simultaneously, I'm looking at this is actually a great opportunity for us to push for technology. But I yet to hear that as the solutions that we are chasing for. And, we are talking a bigger picture about the ecosystem. I think it is not, my concern is not so much about whether do we know the technology or not. I think we have that capabilities, but the challenge is the ecosystem, and more so what surrounds us, whether do we have that push factor to push us to adopt technology. I mean, of course, there are elements of capabilities. If you talk to micro enterprise, I recently talked to the people in agriculture. They say that some say that I don't know how to do it. Some say that I know, but I don't have the resources to do it. But I think more than that is about whether are we living in the environment that will push us toward, taking technology as a solution. So I think this is very critical. I mean, probably that, you know, when we talk about the ecosystem, there are something which is traditional. We have been spending a lot of money on building technologies. I mean, I know there are a lot of research work going on, R&D here and there, but the challenge is until and unless technology become something common to all, I think only then we can really kind of having that ecosystem. So I like to kind of promote for that directions and also for that discussion on that policy of moving forward by being cheap. I think that is something that we need to discuss about.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Azlan, and I think it's a good summary that you gave, which I'm going to pose a question to all the panelists, and I would like to start with Mr. Jeffrey. Prof. Azlan mentioned that we are always being cheap compared for the past 20 years, in fact. And COVID, the opportunity of COVID to restructure society, to restructure the economy, was not fully capitalized. We do not use technology to solve our problems. We still been asking about foreign workers, cheap foreign workers. Maybe Jeffrey, you can share with us, why is this? Why firms don't want to use technology? Why digital adoption, technology adoption is very low despite so many incentives given by the government?
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. Yeah, I tend to agree with Tan Sri in the sense that I think by and large, the economy seems to be, in the past at least, has been pretty much very cost sensitive. And I think that drives a lot of issues in the sense that we're quite happy with buying everything at the lowest possible price and not extract and not get things at a premium because that would basically, more is better, cheap is good, and so on. However, I think technology is the platform that we can use to basically, I mean, the community that I'm in, the electronic sector, they didn't suffer much. I mean, there was some suffering, but they didn't suffer much during the COVID pandemic era. In fact, the demand for electronics components and services increased. And some of the members in our community were smiling ear to ear in terms of being able to to leverage some of the very poor situation that the world is in. But I think we need to basically, as a country, since the 70s, being part of the electronics community, we've basically been happy with very slow at moving from being happy at giving jobs to our population, low-level jobs in manufacturing, to growing from there into R&D, where we create high-value jobs and our own IP, and to take our destiny into our own hands has been really, really tough, because I think this our community and our persona, we need to learn how to take risks and how to create our own IPs and to go and be part of that global citizenry of driving our own IP into the marketplace. And it has been slow, but we see some successes, but it's been very slow, to be very honest.
Let me continue to Dr. Yusof. In terms of technology, we see some, while we were talking, I saw Food Panda just now, and cannot help but thinking, technology make a small group very rich, and that Food Panda driver cannot become CEO. He's not even protected. How then we can use technology as a bridge towards, or ladder towards upward mobility, rather than a divider? Because, for instance, when COVID, we see the education, for instance, technology make those without equipment become left behind.
The success story under many aspects is really also the capacity of, when it comes to the institution, the social capital, shifting also what society actually wants and adapting it to some of these new trends and new demands. So I think maybe that's something that the country should keep in mind as well when I was hearing before about the application of technology also in the educational sector, or a question of why technology is not being adopted, why some of these new tech markets, if you want, are not finding enough demand in the country. I think probably looking also at what institutions can do to work with the private sector, with civil society as well, will be also part of the solution. I think that's something that we see. We have also collected some data in 2020 on where each country is investing more, and both in terms of R&D and adoption of some of these technology clusters. And for example, also from our data, at least, which is based on the perception of some executives from Malaysia, of a number of them, it seems that actually there's a lot of government push also on the R&D for some of the specific categories of technologies, for example, the ones around the green agenda, so water, waste management, but also green transport, etc. And while some other ones, like Internet of Things, etc., are left mostly to the private sector, because probably there is already demand in itself for some of these digital markets when it comes to both the technology development and adoption. And similarly also, when we look at the adoption, most of the government support has been going to some of these green technology clusters, and probably that's also the right approach when it comes to probably helping some of these new aspects of growth that would be also beneficial for sustainability. So I think probably also post-COVID, this broader approach beyond growth will be central, and that's why I guess when we talk about economic transformation, it's more and more not just about bringing up prosperity, but doing it in a way that it's also good for the environment and for society. So I would say maybe those are some of the key principles. Then each country should really do it by itself, really trying to understand where it can focus, what are the new niches, what are the new markets, and I think that's where the foresight approach is probably what actually helps. So bringing the right stakeholders together, having them talk on where the world is going, where Malaysia is going, where the strengths are, etc., etc. So it's difficult to do it ex ante, but really that type of approach would be what would be successful probably.
Madani, moving towards more competitive economy, companies to encourage companies to use more technology, digital adoption to be higher. Do you think the government has done enough? Is money an issue? Should we put more money, pour more money to encourage firms or give better incentive for firms to adopt technology? When you look, I cannot run away from Korea because I love that country. Even on creative industry, part of the money for K-pop, for instance, come from the Korean government, not from the private sector. They pour a lot of money. In Malaysia, is money an issue? Is the government efficient enabler towards adoption?
I think, like I mentioned also before, probably it's not just about the money. I think it's really creating those conditions, right? So I think back to the 7 conditions that we have in the paper. Money can help you with the invention, can help you with the production, with some of those conditions, the demand, the infrastructure, but not all of it will be driven just by money. And I think also it's a question of how you do it in terms of how the public and the private sector create those partnerships in a way that it's beneficial for the country. So I think probably how much money, it's only one part of the story. I think it's also how these collaborations are shaped and how actually they will be able to create an environment where companies can adopt the technologies, but also consumers actually have the capacity and the money to buy some of these new products. So I think it's difficult to make an assessment also across all markets and sectors, but I would say definitely the government needs to play a role with the private sector, and but also how the collaboration is shaped will be part of the solution, and not just more money wouldn't be just enough. Probably it's really how those collaborations are taking place.
Thank you. Saya post that to Madani. Now, Datuk Madani, last question that I will pose to the panelists before let Prof. Azlan to summarize. You mentioned about IoT, about robotics. Does our education system currently, from primary all the way to the top, we are preparing well towards this kind of industry? It's also linked to what Jeffrey mentioned. To create high value jobs, and to create high value jobs, we also need not only for incentive from the demand side, but also from the supply side. Either we are doing enough on that, or what can we do to differentiate ourselves from the Singaporeans, the Koreans, and the Americans? Which need should we focus on in particular?
Thank you. I think I'm going to be quite upfront, blunt on this one. Mari, one of the programs that we provide is to train SPM leavers, those that couldn't enter any institutions of higher learning. And these are those having not enough credit. They can't even enter a GAP Mara. So we have done almost 40,000, and we train them and we provide them placement. In other words, we guarantee them jobs. And to our surprise, many of these, so to speak, not having enough credits during their SPM, they're very skillful. However, our system, well, it's not purely system. There's system, there is society perception, all of that. We need to improve. For example, those whom are very skillful, they will go through SPM and try to get as many distinctions as they can, enter university, and somehow they lost their way in terms of enhancing that specific skill that they were already good in, because the system doesn't allow that to happen. While those that are not having good distinctions during SPM, and then we tend to discover them in the kampongs and so on, they are trained. Of course, I'm not saying all of them are good. Come on, there are 400,000 SPM in Malaysia on a yearly basis. Only half, 200,000 of them could enter university and some form of institutions of learnings. The other 200,000 are left, to struggle, by themselves, try to get certificates and so on. So we are really trying to help those that are not able to go anywhere. So my point here is, number one, the education system. I think during the secondary school, I think we really need to already identify those that are really very skillful and not to place them in, how in every school we have like, the last two classes, just because they are not academically skilled or not academically good, they are put in the last two classes. But many from our experience are very skillful. But the schools are not able to give them the skill set that they need to move forward. Because there's no such, I would say, there's no such structure to it. Yeah, so I think that's really bad. And secondly is, I think the society, this awareness culture, I think we really need to tell our society that vocational schools are good schools. These are not for leftovers. These are not for dropouts. Polytechnics are very good schools. These are places where we can really harness our skills and deploy specific technologies that are relevant in the context of the current industry. So I'm on board of Polytechnic, this coursework, this academia syllabuses and so on. So I think now Polytechnics and of course higher education, they're open now. They're discussing, a lot of discussion are going on, to really cater for this group of Malaysians, the youth lah, so to speak. But I think a great deal of more work needs to be done, and this has got to be done by everybody, by everyone. You know, government agencies, I mean, there are so many of us, I mean, 100 over government agencies, yeah, and many are very specific into certain sectors. You know, we ourselves, in my opinion, we also need to be very dedicated in the areas that we are to develop and we are to promote, and we need to really have that capability to the level that you know, we are able to handhold our industry players within that specifics so that they could deploy and adopt the technology that they are supposed to deploy and apply so that they can grow further within their respective sector. And these are very specifics. I mean, there is really no point talking about general stuff, you know, technology fine, industry 4.0, but really, does 3D printing is 3D printing required across all sectors? No, the answer is no. Is automation required across all processes? The answer is no. You know, but who can determine what is needed? And of course, what is needed would also depend on the business plan of the company. You know, so I think a very different approach to all of this need to be done, not only from a policy perspective, but really from the implementing agencies. We really need to think through when we have programs and when we get budget to implement all these programs, we really need to think through and you know, get it deployed effectively according to the requirements of that specific sector that we are supposed to develop and grow. Yeah, including of course human capital, including the workforce, including, look, when we talk about workforce, we actually need to convince the parents about how good it is to work in that particular sector. Look, we've come across many instances, you know, parents not allowing their children to work in factories, for example. Yeah, there are parents who allow, but there are parents that don't allow. Yeah, because they perceive there is no career growth in the factory. So there are two things here that we need to address. Number one is the factory themselves, the industry people themselves. You know, there are certain industries whereby they themselves are not really focused into growing their sector, and therefore career growth is quite stagnant. You know, but there are other factories, other industries whereby career growth is enhanced. You know, but sometimes, you know, folks in the kampong or even folks in the city, you know, are not well informed about the career progression that their children could have, you know, as they enter industries, etc. and so on. Okay? So I think these are the general things that I think we need to look at. But obviously, you know, the approach should be really looking from a policy, top bottom, you know, a policy that cuts across. And then the other one is looking at the industry, ensuring that the industry, there's no gap actually, there's no gap in terms of what the policy is intended for, and the policy also intended also to grow the industry, in the industry really understand how the policy is going to mend, how the industry is going to grow their respective sector.
Thank you, Dr. Madani. There's one question from the audience. I would rephrase it and I will amend it a bit because I'm moderator and I can do that. If I can pose to each one of the panelists, keep it short, less than 2 minutes, and then Prof. Azlan can summary and give his views. If you have a couple of minutes with the Prime Minister, what do you want him to do? Just one policy that you want him to do to improve Malaysia competitiveness or Malaysia digital economy. We can start with Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you, Doc. So yes, the question is Malaysian competitiveness or Malaysian
digital economy. Just one policy.
Digital economy. Okay. So from feedback from my community, everything is going digital. It used to be that a lot of their business is 50-50 software and digitalization. Now it's 80% digitalization. And I think the two things that are common denominators in all technologies is electronics and software. And I think I would convince the Prime Minister to basically invest in building these capabilities and develop the ecosystem and infrastructure for these two things. in a big way, and I think that we will see a vast difference in its impact to the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Attilio, maybe you can give, I agree with what Jeffrey said, but for you perhaps you can say something that is more implementable in the short run.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would probably convince the Prime Minister that one policy is not enough, when actually no matter what he tries to do, I think it's probably that probably he will need to take a bit of a broader systemic approach to most of this and look at exactly what we have discussed before. What are the implications also for when it comes to skills, to human capital, to what society wants, where society is going. So probably one policy wouldn't cut it. I think also not necessarily everything can be fixed by policy. I think a lot of it has to do with the culture, with the norms, with the attitudes of the private sector, of the consumers, of the families. So I think also we'll probably refrain from thinking that some policy will be some sort of a magic wand. I think a lot of it is on different levels than not just what the government alone can do. So it's a combination of factors probably.
Thank you. You don't give a
Maybe I didn't really answer the question, but that would be my approach.
All right, thank you. Dr. Madani, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Digitalization and policy, definitely. Look, people have been talking about digitalization, but I think there's need to understand that digitalization is something that will enhance competitiveness. Yeah. So be it in the form of a policy or be it in the form of a roadmap or a blueprint, But I think one thing for sure is we need to digitalize the government processes first. Okay, before we can go further and digitalize our industry, because industries, they're very much based by from their principle to digitalize their process in order to enhance their competitiveness. Yeah. But when we talk about, I think that there's an issue when we talk about digitalization. People think that just by translating your manual into Word, into Excel, that is digitalization. That is not true. We need to understand digitalization is about system integration, real-time input. Real-time input is also via a system, So I think really this whole policy of digitalization and the way that we need to implement digitalization require a reset, because I think the definition of digitalization has just gone from level 1, what used to be 5 years ago, to now a completely different level via especially the cloud services, real-time input. And real-time input is not something that we get from, it's something real-time coming from people, coming from the process owners, etc. And so coming from the process. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Madani. I got the point.
Digitalization that we need to really politicize properly, redefine it, and then give it a level that is due to use digitalization to improve our competitiveness.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Yusof, as a host, what will you tell the Prime Minister?
Well,
only one thing.
Okay. He needs to talk about it. He needs to be that role model for digitalization. That means as he was the spokesperson for a particular interest, he must be that spokesperson for the Malaysian digital initiative or working towards that. I also like to tell him that digitalization, like many things, are not the purview of one ministry or one agency. If you want to mobilize the whole nation to have that competency in digitalization, which I think is a very important competency for now and the future, then you need to tell everybody to back up, and everybody has to have a KPI in terms of digitalizing their activities, their programs, and also what they can contribute to the society. That's my advice to him.
Thank you. Over to you, Professor.
I mean, the discussion is just about to pick actually, but we are supposed to end it very soon, and I look forward for more rounds of discussion. I want to kind of look at the current context. Actually, if any good things that COVID leave to us is that it makes every one of us hungry for technology and digitalizations. I've seen that because of COVID, almost everybody will have to find a way of using some form of technology, some form of digitalization to serve their common needs. You know, the schools are forced. We know it's not good, but the schools are forced. The universities, I was a vice chancellor before. It's so difficult to get your professors to do online, and they say it doesn't work. But now for 1 year, they've been teaching online. You know, I mean, it is an opportunity for us. It is a serious opportunity that we do not want to miss this. That's why, I mean, everywhere that I go, because everybody is talking about recovery from the crisis. But I want to say that recovery without reforms is a serious waste. So one of the dimensions is how can we take technology further up in every aspect of our living. I mean, of course, sometimes we talk about technology for the high-end, all the, you know, sophisticated technologies, but I think technology can be applied in basically everywhere. You know, I've seen, I mean, to me, I'm surprised. I've seen restaurants in Malaysia that basically that do not need like a waiter to come to you to ask for your order. I mean, you go in, everything is on your mobile, and the food, I mean, sometimes I ask them, are you sure, do you get my order? They say, yeah, in the system. And not only that, I mean, even when you pay, you just click on your phone. Meaning that it's proven we can do this without what we assume that like we must have. You know, I mean, so this is, I think, the way forward. We need to look across entire layers of society. Of course, what Dato' Yusof mentioned earlier, the idea is not to make a human-less economy, but we want to use human rightly, you know, for them to use technology to serve all the needs, be it economic, be it social, be it education, and so on. And I think one of our panel earlier on, I think that Madani mentioned about education. I have a lot to say on that, but I think education, the problem in Malaysia is that we tend to focus on the last runner. If I become the first runner, Usain Bolt is the last runner, trust me, Usain Bolt pun kalah. Basically, you know, we must understand that it is a primary school, it's a preschool, primary school, secondary school, universities, and lifelong learning. The entire layers of the education, where in short, I'll say, if we really want to bring in technology as something core in our living, you need to, the short of word, revamp the entire education. We need to discuss on that later on. I mean, because as is today, I have serious doubt that technology will be core in the nation, as is, if the education...
Why not?
As is today.
Why don't we revamp it?
We must revamp it. I mean, that is the call that we want. I mean, we want to hear for. I feel like, you know, that is something urgent, something immediate. At the form of EAC now, we are looking into all these structural dimensions. Yes, we are queuing up higher education and education to come to EAC and say that how to get the right talent for the future. What need to be done? You know, I think Datuk Madani mentioned clearly about, you know, all the segmentations of things. When a lot of Malaysians, when they hear the word vocational, means, oh, because you cannot go for a better schooling. I mean, that was we were introduced. The term vocational school in the 70s or early 80s is about people who are not able to go to, you know, to proceed further in good Form 4 science stream and so on. So things have to be reversed now, and some of them has been locked. I mean, you talk to the parents, I talk to the Kementerian Pendidikan, Ministry of Education, they are still struggling to convince the nation that vocational things is good. So, and so these are, you know, these are something that has been long in our system, and definitely it calls for a reform to do all this.
An apt conclusion that you gave from the last sentence. I would like to thank everyone for listening, especially to the panelists who shared their views, insight, to Mike for hosting us, and to Prof. Azlan for wrapping it up nicely. I would pass back to the MC. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Very fruitful exchange of views. Recovery without reform is such a serious waste, yeah, Tan Sri. So, thank you, Tan Sri Nur Azlan, for his inspiring words. Yes, we will have few more rounds of constructive dialogue. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, for moderating the session, and esteemed panelists for fruitful discussion. So, I hope today's talk has benefited all. We look forward to seeing all of you guys at our next episode. For any comments and inputs, would you please follow Malaysia's platform, social media and website. Have a lovely evening ahead, everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.